Welcome ladies and gents, Chris Andre here. You can find me at BetBoxing on Twitter. Of course you can subscribe to the channel. Let's talk boxing. You know how we like a little psychological deep dive on this channel. We haven't done that in a while on this channel, have we? I want to talk about Ben Davison. I want to talk about Tyson Fury and Usyk Kambosos, because I believe that these three characters, and I'm sure there are many others in the sport like this, are a little bit misunderstood with the way they come across and the cockiness that they want to bring, or arrogance some people call it. They just seem to rub people up the wrong way. And a lot of times I believe that that criticism is completely unfair, but it also boils down to a misunderstanding of who they are fundamentally as people and what drives them. So I want to talk a little bit about that. Firstly, let's talk about what has led me to this discussion. And that is Ben Davison came out in an interview with IFL. And he said that he believes that for Anthony Joshua to beat Alexander Usyk, he's going to have to make him fight at an incessant tempo. Now, a lot of people ridiculed Ben Davison for this. And they said, what are you talking about? Usyk's got a brilliant engine and so on and so forth. Now, I personally believe that Ben Davison is a fantastic trainer and a brilliant tactician. I think he's got a great eye for detail and stuff like that. I also think he's got a great performance analyst with him in Lee Wiley. So when people call him a personal trainer, I always find it really funny. He's also got people around him that value his opinion, and you know they're some of the top people in the sport when it comes to boxing. Billy Joe Saunders, master boxer. Tyson Fury establishing himself as one of the best heavyweights of all time, you could argue. Devin Haney, who he's called into camp to help with in terms of tactical approaches. Bill Haney often speaks about the fact that it's Ben Davison that will come up with a game plan for his son, even though Bill himself is the head trainer. Josh Taylor, one of the pound for pound #1 fighters in the world. When these guys are valuing your opinion, you cannot be just a personal trainer. What do you think they are, stupid? Just him getting on the pads with them and having a conversation about boxing, they would see right through him. But nonetheless, this seems to be the general narrative. Ben Davison's just a personal trainer, right? That leads to Ben becoming arrogant in return, cocky. And that also rubs people up the wrong way. And we'll get to that in a moment. Now, Ben Davison's view on what a key to victory is here, I personally do disagree with. As much as I rate his knowledge and his abilities, you can't always agree with every top fighter or trainer or whoever. There'll be top trainers that disagree with each other. So only one of them can be right. Okay, so, you know, this is not a slight on Ben Davison. I just personally don't believe that specific thing is the key to victory. Whether you're talking about guys that try to walk him down, guys like Murat Gassiev, whether you're talking about guys that are seeking essentially to fight a raiding style like Michael Hunter, to force him to work in areas where they choose to work, whether it's someone that wants to have a high level technical fast boxing match with him like Anthony Joshua in the first fight, regardless of what style comes at him, he's happy to go through the gears, Alexander Usyk. He's got a terrific engine. So even if you're being economical, which is what Ben Davison is talking about here, you're putting foot pressure, you're fighting kind of like Canelo Alvarez. And I know that Ben Davison and Lee Wiley are massive admirers of Canelo. You're essentially putting your foot into a certain position, using your upper body movement to make a guy think that he has to work. And that's what it seems like he's talking about here. Make Usyk work. That's not something that I believe is a key to victory. I will do my own technical breakdown and I'll get very deep and detailed about how I believe Anthony Joshua can win this fight, and I do believe he can win this fight. I'll do that at a later date. But Ben Davison, you have to understand, he gets all this backlash, then he gets a little bit cocky, and people then suddenly turn around and say, look how arrogant he is. You know, this is David Brent and all that. You can't win. Because when Ben Davison is quiet, for instance, and he's not saying much, he's clueless, he's a personal trainer. When he then delivers, he's bound to say, I told you so. And then he gets told off for saying, I told you so. A lot of people will say, look at all these fighters that he's got, they've all regressed. I don't believe that to be true. When Tyson Fury first joined Ben Davison, he was in terrible shape. And you could argue that the first display was better than the third. The second was the best display. The first fight he had with Sugar Hill out of the 3 Wilder fights were incredible. But the first Wilder fight, based on what he had to overcome and had to come back from, it was pretty incredible. He lost, 2, maybe 3 rounds against Deontay Wilder after coming back from that. That's a brilliant display. Josh Taylor, yes, Shane McGuigan did a terrific job with him. But this idea that he's just suddenly regressed because of that Cattrall fight, I don't buy into it. The best night he's had, the most historic night against the toughest opponent he had, was against Ramirez. And he was spectacular in that fight, and he was with Ben Davison in that fight. Lee McGregor, he was a British and Commonwealth champion. Well, he won the European. Lee Wood, he's grown exponentially since joining up with Ben Davison. So this idea that everyone that gets with him just regresses, I just don't buy it personally. I don't buy it. Now, Does he have a lot to learn? Of course he does. He's still a young man. He's gaining experience and so on and so forth. He, I'm sure, will know some of his own limitations on where he needs to grow. And if he doesn't, in 5 years from now, he'll look back and say, okay, I'm a lot better now than I was back then. A lot of people often use the criticism of who's he taken from scratch and taught them and raised them from nothing, basically, and made them into somebody. First and foremost, let's say you pick up a kid who's 8 years old and he's not going to get a world title shot till he's, say, 25. That means you were training the kid for 17 years to get him to that point. We're talking about Virgil Hunter, Andre Ward type of stuff. Ben Davison's a young man. He's not been in the game long enough to be able to train someone for 17 years, right? But that is also a different skill set than it is to take a ready-made fighter and then push him to the next level. To do what, for instance, Manny Stewart did with Vladimir Klitschko. It's a different skill set. It doesn't mean just because you haven't taken someone from scratch and taken them to the top that you're not an elite level trainer. And I'm going to use the analogy of football because I know a lot of you guys are football fans, soccer fans for our American viewers. You have football managers like Jose Mourinho, like Antonio Conte, elite level managers who will go in, take over a football club, who are nothing, they're struggling, they're not doing well at all. And within 2 years or 3 years, he'll make them win a major trophy. Now, that is essentially building from scratch. It's the equivalent. You've taken a nothing team, a team that's not delivering, and you've made them deliver. But then you've got a coach like Pep Guardiola. Pep Guardiola will go and take over a team that is already very good. Manchester City were good. They were chasing the title. Under Mancini, they were a good side, right? Barcelona, excellent when he took over. But he then takes them to a new level. They go to a new standard, a new elite level standard. He's not taking a team from nothing. You haven't gone and given him a Porto or a Roma who's struggling and then he's gone and won a major tournament. No, he's got a big team already, but just taking them to a level where you go, wow. They're both elite coaches though. It's just a different method of doing things. Well, the same applies to Ben Davison. Now, when I mention this as an analogy, somebody said to me online on Twitter, I can't believe you're comparing Ben Davison to Pep Guardiola. That's not what we're doing here. We're talking about analogies that cross over, that apply. I'm trying to explain to you that just because he hasn't taken someone as a kid, it doesn't necessarily mean that he's not capable of doing that, first and foremost. Or secondly, that he's not a top trainer. It's a different skill set. You have a lot of people that are critical of Virgil Hunter. Now, I think Virgil Hunter's a very good trainer, but a lot of people say, well, he's never emulated the success he's had with Andre Ward with anybody else. So what, is he an elite trainer or is he not? Maybe you're going to see he's taken someone from scratch and taken them to the top. That might make him an elite trainer. But then you might look at the other fact that he hasn't really had many other elite fighters since then. And you might think to yourself, well, maybe he's not as good as I thought he was. Who's the better trainer? The guy who's going to take someone who's half ready and make them, or, ready, who's a good fighter, quality fighter, world-class fighter, and then take him to the next level? Or is it the guy who takes someone from scratch? They're both quality. It's just a different skill set. Now, Ben Davison got quite arrogant when it came to Twitter on this, and he's actually challenged somebody to come down to the gym, and he's willing to pay their expenses, their flight, give him £150 for the day as well, as a consultant, to give him the opportunity to watch his fighters train and then give his fighters some tips. He's done this on Twitter today. Boxing Alba is the gentleman that we're talking about here. And yeah, I just felt that it was a show of Ben Davison flexing, so to speak. And a lot of people are saying, look how arrogant he is, because he also made a comment saying, look at this thread and you'll understand boxing Twitter. He's quite dismissive. And again, this rubbed people up the wrong way, but you have to try and understand this person's mentality. He was given an opportunity as a young man, and many people almost felt like it was unfair, and he started to get a lot of haters very quickly. Now, because he's so he's got so much conviction and so much self-belief, which you have to get to the top, a lot of people dislike him. He rubs people up the wrong way. Now, it doesn't mean if you don't rate Ben Davison that you're a hater. You just don't rate him, right? That's fair enough. But there's also an element, I'm saying, of people who, regardless of what Ben will achieve, just won't like him, right? And he needs that, in my opinion. He's the sort of person that seems to need people to doubt him so he can want to prove them wrong. Because every time he gets a big victory, you see him when Leewood got that knockout against Michael Conlan, he put up a little clip of them somewhat working, or they were working on something similar to the way the fight ended. And he's trying to say, look, not bad for a PT, right? A personal trainer. In other words, he's telling you about the habits of Conlan and how he worked on this. So he's trying to rub it in people's faces. He needs that drive. Now, George Kambosos is another one who I find very interesting. I've always found George to be a very interesting character because he's always been somebody who's gone on the road and he's had a real self-belief. But he basically came out and spoke up in a method that was almost disrespectful, I guess you could say, of Tszyu. And a lot of people wondered where this came from because he was very praising of Jaya Pataya, congratulations brother, and so on and so forth. When it came to Tszyu in Australia, he was a little bit dismissive. Now these two have some history because in the past they used to train in the same gym. And Kambosos was asked about Tszyu and he basically came out and said, I'm still the biggest name in Australian boxing. Tim can barely get crowds to his fights in Australia. The last time I checked, when did Tszyu fight in front of 41,000 fans in a packed stadium? He can barely get 10,000 fans to his fights. It's small time stuff. Even against Jeff Horn in 2020, it was Horn's name that attracted the crowd. And these two did have a falling out in the past. Like I said, they were in the same gym and he was going to be trained by Tszyu's uncle, Igor Golubev. And for whatever reason, he left that gym. He started training with Justin Fortune instead. And eventually he moved away from Australia to pursue his dream when he was given the opportunity to train with Manny Pacquiao. Now, when one of the greatest fighters of all time wants to train you, you can totally understand why he would take that jump. But when he did that in preparation for Jeff Horn, he received a lot of criticism from the Australian fans and a lot of the Australian boxing establishment. And Jeff Horn himself was very critical of George Kambosos, and he came out and he said, at the end of the day, I don't owe Jeff ish. If Jeff still got a bit of a grudge after the fight, we can sort it out. Maybe in the ring. We can sort it out, right? Maybe in the ring. In other words, it doesn't have to be in the ring. 2 divisions, no problem. I don't owe Jeff nothing. I know he's a school teacher and likes to play by the rules, but I come from a different background. I take my opportunities when they come. You can't miss an opportunity like this. Now, Tszyu has referred to George Kambosos as very insecure. In response to all this, Tszyu's right, but you have to try and understand what has led to George Kambosos being like this. On his way up, George Kambosos wasn't really getting the plaudits that other Australian fighters were getting. And Jeff Fenech, who's one of the greatest Australian boxers of all time, came out and said, George Kambosos' performance against Teofimo Lopez was up there with the greatest Australian sporting achievements of all time. This is headline news. I'm watching now and he's not on any of the channels. Listen, he's just done what nobody thought he could do. And I'm one of those guys. And I said it was the hardest job ever. And he did it. Now, you have to understand, when you are on your way up, you're not receiving supposed support. You're not getting the limelight shined onto you, and then you do go and achieve something spectacular. Make no mistake, Teofimo Lopez was one of the top 10 pound for pound fighters in the world. A tremendous resume. Lomachenko, Nakatani, Richard Comey. He banged out Richard Comey in 2 rounds. Like, who does that to Comey? What a fantastic resume that guy had. One of the biggest punchers in the sport, pound for pound. And he's slick with it. He's a brilliant counter puncher with it. His pull counter, his roll counter, brilliant stuff. He went and beat him in his backyard. And still, he wasn't being put on the news in Australia. That creates a bitterness. When Tyson Fury beat Vladimir Klitschko, if you will remember, he walked into the room, press conference room, with his dad. And his dad made the reporters stand up and applaud this man. He made them. And it was actually some people would have seen it as a cringeworthy moment. Others would have seen it as quite awkward. Like, oh man, like, you know. He felt like he had to do something to get his son recognition. Why? I mean, even after he'd beaten Vladimir Klitschko, you had one of the major newspapers in the UK. I can't remember if it was the Mirror, the Sun. I don't want to commit to who it was. But it was a boxing journalist who'd been in the sport for a long time. I remember that. And one of the tabloid newspapers, the biggest ones, said that Tyson Fury and Vladimir Klitschko was a terrible fight. Like watching a couple of lummoxes, I'm not sure what the plural is for it, falling all over each other. And he can't wait for Anthony Joshua to clear up the world of boxing. In other words, Tyson Fury is this big klutz, useless, ugly to watch, terrible fighter. He's just achieved something special and he's still not getting the recognition. And think about how bitter he was. A lot of people often say, why is he always going after Anthony Joshua? He's going after Anthony Joshua because of that bitterness. How dare you not give me the recognition that I deserve? And it drove him. It had a fire in his belly as a result. And since then, he's engaged in this art of war, psychological warfare against Anthony Joshua, where he brings him up every 2 minutes. And he does seem to be living in his head rent-free, because for AJ to come out and say that he ended up fighting Usyk in a manner whereby it was a boxing match rather than anything else, because he wanted to prove to the world that he wasn't this big stiff idiot, it shows you how much Fury was in his head. Even after he beat Vladimir Klitschko, what's the first thing he said in the ring? Fury, where you at? He wanted to disprove Fury. He wanted to silence this man. So Fury was able to get in AJ's head. But what drove him, the bitterness of referring to him as this big stiff bodybuilder, he's got a great physique and all that, but he can't fight. He looks great, but he can't fight. He's 1 minute he's praising him and he's giving him a lot of respect. The next minute he's trashing him and knocking him down. He does all that because he has this bitterness within him. He feels, this is mine. This is what I deserve, and no one's giving it to me. And if you notice, when Tyson Fury is comfortable and he's getting some plaudits, sometimes he can have some iffy performances. He went to the United States with big fanfare when he was going to fight Cunningham. That was a dodgy performance, especially early on in the fight. He adjusted, but it was dodgy. Otto Wallin, that's a pushover. Tyson Fury, you seen what he's just done? Pushover. Hard fight. But then he gets in the ring against Deontay Wilder. People are saying he's got no chance. This fat dude's been at the ring for all this time. Ain't no man with a cleavage beating Deontay Wilder. And he went and put in that performance in that first fight. That's the sort of person he is. He's going to go to Dusseldorf. He's going to get sparked out. He goes and plays with Vladimir Klitschko and wins the heavyweight title. It drives him. Now, George Kambosos, going back to him, he may not have lost the fight against Devin Haney because he lost that fire. But you can't rule it out. Because he had all that rage within him, all that conviction he used to speak with. He used to want all that smoke from everyone, and he still does. You have to give him a lot of credit. You've got other lightweights who are being put on a pedestal like Tank Davis. They're in witness protection. Kambosos wants all that smoke from everybody. But did he lose an edge when people finally started saying, you know what, this boy can fight? And now he's actually getting stick for being quiet. I've seen a bunch of threads on Twitter. You can find them if you type this in. People are saying Kambosos been awfully quiet since he lost to Devin Haney. He ain't said a word since he got his ass beat and all that. Why? Has he got that fire back? Is he back in training? Now, this might not affect the back in training in a manner, by the way, that I mean that real with that conviction, the eye of the tiger. Why did he struggle to make the weight in the first fight? Was it an oversight? Or did he start to believe his own hype? Has he got that fire back? Now, I'm not necessarily saying he's going to win the fight, right? I'm not saying that. I fancied Devin Haney in the first fight. I thought it would be a lot more competitive. Kambosos did not do the things I felt he should have done in order to make it competitive. Let's see if he makes the adjustments and does that in the second fight. But the point I'm making here is that he can be a lot more competitive, but he's going to need that drive. He's going to need that fire. Has he refound it maybe because people are doubting him again? These sorts of people, these sorts of characters need that it's me against the world. They need it. They need it, and you have to foster it if you're a trainer. You have to harbour it. If I'm the trainer of Kambosos, I am printing every single one of those tweets, and I'm stapling them all over the gym wall, and I'm making him read a bunch of them every day before he trains and on his way out home to want to silence people that are laughing at him and mocking him. Ben Davison, he's a trainer, he's not a fighter, but he's got that within him where he wants to tell you, I told you so. George Kambosos wants to say, I told you so. Tyson Fury wanted to say, I told you so. And that's the mentality. And this doesn't always work for all types of fighters or trainers. Some fighters need an arm around the shoulder. In football terms, to go back to that analogy, you have Jose Mourinho that used to harbour that. They're always after us, right? They're always sending our players off. They're always doing dodgy decisions against us. It's us against the world. When he was at Real Madrid, right? Barcelona with their UNICEF and all that, you know, all this backing that they've got. Everybody loves them. They're the darlings of UEFA. They get all the refereeing decisions. We're going to have to overcome them. When he was at Porto, same thing. Oh yeah, I'm the special one because Man United, they've got Alex Ferguson maybe dislikes me because I'm so special. They got all that money and I still managed to get the better of him. We're the nobody. We're this small club supposedly and we still managed to knock them out. It's that thing of, you put us down, okay. It's a siege mentality though. Now we go to war. And like I said, sometimes you need a guy who feeds off the love of the crowd. He needs an arm around the shoulder. It's different. Not everybody's like that. But these characters are. So try and understand what drives them. Try and understand why they have that bitterness. They need it. Let me know what you think, ladies and gents, about this mindset. Let me know who else you might think that thinks this way and acts this way and actually thrives off people doubting him. Thanks for watching, everyone. Chat to you soon. Take care. God bless. Please don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe button, notifications button.